Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the choices in some of my favorite games and figure out which decision is the right one. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and in this episode, we're diving back into Telltale Games' The Walking Dead Season 1, this time getting into Episode 5, the Season 1 finale. In case you missed the previous episodes, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down the series, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. Episode 5 is titled No Time Left, and that title fits in multiple ways. We open right where the previous episode left off, but with a little more context to the situation at hand. The conversation over the radio with the stranger plays out as we see the horde of zombies from the end of episode 3 finally reaching Savannah. The man on the radio says he wants Lee to stop hurting people and insists that this isn't a kidnapping, it's a rescue.
This isn't a kidnapping, Lee.
Then what is it?
A rescue.
Zombies are threatening to enter the room Lee and the group are in, and while trying to jack open the elevator doors at the back of the shelter, Lee passes out. He wakes up just in time to find Kenny standing over him, hacksaw in hand, and preparing to cut the bitten arm off. And this is the first time in the episode we can step back into episode 2 and remember how quick Kenny was to make sure Larry didn't come back. In a way, this changed from make sure he doesn't come back to let's try and keep him alive as long as possible shows a lot of growth in Kenny's character. He seems to regret some of his prior decisions, and we'll get to dive a little more into that as the episode progresses. For now, we have to decide to either cut Lee's arm off or keep it. The hopeful choice here would be to cut it off. Maybe removing the part of the body that was bitten will be enough to keep him alive in the long term. And we only need to look at the Walking Dead television show for evidence of this working. In the Season 3 premiere, one of the group is bitten as they are clearing out the prison. In a quick reaction, Rick, the main character, removes Herschel's leg, and we see the old man go on to survive and be a productive member of the group for a while longer. But that action was within minutes of the bite occurring. Infections have a tendency to spread quickly, and just based on the probable travel time from the house to the bunker, removing the arm would likely not do any good. There's also the increased risk of a secondary infection from the amputation, not to mention the pain involved, and having no medicine would mean that cutting Lee's arm off would pose more risk than any possible benefit. Keeping the arm comes in handy, as the only escape from the bunker involves climbing a ladder several stories up an elevator shaft before finally reaching the roof of the hospital. Lee passes out once more as the group makes their way up the ladder, but by some miracle he manages to hook his legs in the rungs and stay alive just a little longer. Safely on the roof, the group looks out over the city to see what are likely thousands of zombies in the streets. Getting down isn't going to be easy, and doubt about what comes next creeps in as they know Lee is on borrowed time. Stealing a plan to escape from Molly, Lee manages to barely get onto a nearby bell tower and ring the dinner bell for any nearby walkers. Though he barely makes it back to the hospital roof, the effort pays off and they are able to escape down a stairway on the other side of the building. Getting back to the house, they discover that Vernon and the other cancer survivors stole the boat while they were out. As big of an issue as that might be, there's barely time to sit on it as the horde of zombies shows back up, and the group eventually makes their way into the attic of the house, becoming trapped. Under normal circumstances, they could probably just hang out up there and wait for the mass below to disperse. But between Clementine needing to be rescued and Lee being on borrowed time, they need to find a way out sooner rather than later. And this is the second time the situation with Larry comes up. This time in a more direct way, with Kenny outright saying,
Look, we could be looking at a Larry situation here.
Who's Larry?
It's clear there are no established rules yet regarding bite victims or possible deaths, and that lack of clarity winds up causing some heated words before Lee throws a statue head at the wall in frustration. Realizing that another house is on the other side of the wall, they take turns hitting it with a coat rack until Omid finally breaks through, and before long they find themselves standing in one of the bedrooms of the neighboring building. A pair of dead bodies on the bed causes some unease among the group, hitting especially close to home for Kenny as he's still dealing with Katja taking her own life. He's struggling with the idea that anyone would do that to themselves, especially when there are people depending on them. But let's take a minute to really open up this concept. Mental health is an extremely important and deep subject, one that no single video could cover completely. The range of emotions people feel, the way they process and navigate traumatic events, each and every single person is unique. Kenny struggles with the idea of what he considers giving up. In his mind, as long as there's something to fight for, you should fight. But things are never that black and white. We've all experienced bad days mentally. We've had our highs and our lows. In a situation where the world as we know it is coming to an end, where the dead are rising and killing so many, could we really fault those who decided they didn't want to live like that? In our modern world, there are resources. If you're struggling with mental health issues, there are a plethora of programs out there to help you. Whether it's just someone to talk to or something more, we have the ability to reach out and overcome obstacles that might be nearly impossible to overcome otherwise. Speaking as a veteran who dealt with PTSD after coming back from Iraq, I know how important it is to be able to seek a light when everything else seems dark. In that vein, I'll link some resources down in the description below for anyone who might need them. Looking around the room, you find a window that allows access to a roof on the next building over, and after jumping across the zombie-filled alleyway below, the group makes their way across town. A quick radio message from Clementine, while they were working to get out of the attic earlier, told them that she was likely being held in the hotel where her parents normally stayed, and everyone is ready to confront the man who took her. But things couldn't go too smooth, and a reckless bump from Kenny causes Lee to drop the walkie, their only means of communicating with the kidnapper or Clementine, into an opening in one of the roofs. As they're all debating whether it's worth going after, Krista takes matters into her own hands and hops down after it. And things go from bad to worse as the room turns out to be full of zombies. As Lee and Omid struggle to reach Krista, Kenny goes down after her, managing to boost her up before being chased into the shadows by the horde. The last thing we hear is what sounds like Kenny fighting for his life as he tells the group to go on without him. While this could be seen as some form of character growth, I'd say that Kenny jumping down and helping Krista is very in line with who he's been all along. He hasn't been perfect by any means, but who among us would be with all he's been through? If there's enough interest in the comments, I might do a full breakdown on Kenny and other characters at some point in the future. But considering he nearly lost his son on the day we met him, everything he'd been through at the Motor Inn and farm, eventually losing his wife and boy, and then having any chance of what he saw as the only way out being stolen from under him, I'd say the fact that he could still be relied on to save someone and potentially die in the process speaks volumes on his character. Reluctantly, Lee, Krista, and Omid move on and wind up within sight of the Marsh house. There's only a couple of streets left to cross, but a rickety sign Lee uses to make it over one of them winds up falling before Krista and Omid can join him. Knowing he's already been bit and willing to cross the very gates of hell to save Clementine, Lee tells the pair to meet them by the train outside of town before climbing onto the street and forcing his way through the throng of zombies. It's one of the most badass sequences in the entire series, but just as the action is hitting a crescendo, Lee spots a familiar station wagon. Inside the hotel, the hallways are full of nothing but ghosts as Lee creeps along. A sound from one of the rooms catches his attention, and he enters to find the door on the other side of the room being held shut by a rope. Going to investigate, a noise behind him breaks the silence, and he turns to face the stranger that's been following them. The temptation to lash out is strong, but the best course of action is to remain calm and stay civil. Not only does he have a gun pointed at you, but it's also clear he's been through a lot, and mainly just wants to be heard by someone. It turns out the food your group took from the station wagon at the end of episode 2 belonged to him and his family. His son had gone missing while they were out hunting, and his wife blamed him for it. They were out looking for the boy when their food was stolen, and the loss of that, along with the loss of their son, drove his wife to take their other child and leave. He found them dead a day later, but was given a renewed lease on life when he heard Clementine's voice on the walkie-talkie he had. He tells you all of this, and no matter what choices you've made along the way, no matter how often you try to do the right thing and how calm you stay, the situation ends the same way. So what was the point? Let's pretend the game is real life for a moment. You're Lee. You spent all of this time making decisions you thought were the best for the group, putting Clementine first most of the time and just trying to do the right thing. Now you find yourself sitting across from a man who's telling you he's going to kill you and take the little girl you've come to view as a daughter. Even as you explain your choices and say you were doing your best. You would likely start to question everything, every decision, every moment. Maybe, if you'd only done something different, Clementine wouldn't have been taken. Maybe you wouldn't have been bitten. Maybe you'd be getting on a boat with Kenny and sailing off into the relative safety of the ocean. Sure, we can replay the game, find out what happens if other decisions are made, and learn that none of those changes lead to a better outcome, but Lee can't do that. And we can't do that either in real life. It's natural to question yourself when things don't go your way, to look at what you could have done better or different. But that doesn't do anyone any good. One thing I've done in this series is try to put myself as much as I can in Lee's shoes. While we've discussed the occasional branching story, the point has been to really examine the decisions and try to figure out what is the best decision you could make in the moment given the knowledge that Lee has. We had to work within the confines of the game, following a predetermined story, but that's not a lot different than how things are in the real world. Maybe real life isn't scripted, but we also don't have the ability to do things over or see the end from day one. If you've played the game before, you know what's going to happen. Maybe you've only played it once and you're hoping that different choices will lead to a different ending. Or maybe you've played it several times and you know that there's no hope for a better outcome for Lee. My first playthrough was as the episodes were being released, and I had no idea where things were going. I cut off Lee's arm in the hope that he might live. I kept Lily on the RV after she shot Doug, thinking maybe it had been an accidental discharge, and because I felt bad for helping Kenny end whatever might have been left of Larry's life. As I played it through a second time, and a third, I started to realize that it was going to end the same way no matter what I did, and I started to wonder whether any of the choices I made mattered. The text at the start of every episode was telling me that they did, so why did they feel so hollow? The truth is, just like in life, you have to give the moments meaning. You have to decide what those decisions mean to you and what you want to get out of them. Maybe you enjoy overanalyzing them, searching for the philosophical right and wrong choices. Or maybe you just like seeing each of the different outcomes. Perhaps you want a specific group to go with you in search of Clementine. Or maybe you just want to see how angry you can make Kenny or Lily. No matter your purpose, you find yourself sitting across from a broken man who's so lost in the conversation with his zombie wife's head that he doesn't hear the click of the door as Clementine escapes. She smacks the man over the head with a bottle, and you struggle with him until a gunshot rings out. You roll his body off of you and look up to see Clem frozen in place, still aiming the gun at where the man had been. After a brief conversation, you open the door of the hotel room to reveal a zombie who'd been listening in the hallway. A moment of panic turns into wonder as the corpse doesn't attack, and once the thing has been dealt with, Lee determines it's the zombie's guts on his clothes that protected him. Being entirely too smart for her age, Clementine readies herself as Lee cuts the newly dead walker open and gives her a fresh coat of what has to be the worst smelling paint of all time. As bad as it is, the plan works to perfection, and the pair are able to make it safely down the street a little ways before Clementine's worst nightmare comes true. After months of wandering, miles of travel, and enduring so much pain, her parents now stand a few feet away from her, roaming the street as the walking dead. As Lee tries to comfort her, he passes out in the middle of the street. But Clem manages to keep her wits about her, somehow dragging Lee into a nearby shop before closing and locking the heavy metal door. Normally, that would be the best move, but as Lee wakes and reveals the bite on his arm to her, it becomes apparent how big the mistake was. Lee is barely able to walk at this point, and it's all he can do to direct Clementine as she finds a way out of the store. She handles a zombified security guard, and you're left to make one of the most difficult decisions of the game. Do you have Clementine shoot Lee, or let him become a walker? Letting him turn, becoming the thing that they've all been trying to avoid becoming, might be the easiest thing for Clem. She's been through so much already, and she sees Lee as a surrogate father at this point. In some ways, it parallels the decision about whether to have Kinney or Lee shoot Duck. But that's why she needs to be the one to do it. If she's going to survive, she's going to need to be able to face the worst the world has to throw at her. She'll have to be tougher than nails and do things that others can't. As she points the gun, looking over the site through a wall of tears, time comes to a stop. For Lee, this is the final act. The sound of gunpowder forcing a bullet through a tight chamber rings out, and the screen goes black. But the road doesn't end here. Clementine still has her own story to live. Before we can dive into Season 2 of The Walking Dead, however, we have to survive 400 days. And that's what we're going to be looking at next week as we keep unraveling the philosophy and ethics of the series. I've been really enjoying going through the amazing comments you all have been leaving, and I want to let you know that I read them all even if I don't leave a response. I want to shout out KickRimmon1450 and Can You the Man from the video for episode 1, pointing out that Lee didn't kill his wife, as I alluded to. I'd forgotten about the conversation with the stranger and another prior conversation where Lee can mention that his wife is still alive, and they pointed it out. When we finish covering all the seasons, I will likely do some kind of a retrospective where I talk about the other choices that I could have made in the series and read off some of my favorite comments from various episodes. So leave your thoughts below and share what choices you made as we go along. I've also got a Patreon for those who are interested in supporting the channel in other ways. I share videos early over there, as well as snippets from books I'm working on and other behind the scenes kind of stuff. So if that's something that you'd like to see, click on the link in the description. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.